Okay, good morning everybody, good afternoon even. Is there anybody who doesn't have a course outline from the first lecture? You don't need it for this lecture, but if you didn't make it to the first lecture, stick up your hand. Yeah, there's a couple of them, they're down here anyway. You won't need them for this lecture, but just drop down and you can pick up a course outline later on. Okay, lot to do, please take your seats, come down, please take your seats, we've loads to do. So, two announcements before we start. The first announcement is the tutorials on Fridays. Things change quickly. The tutorials on a Friday, I thought I was going to be able to give you Fridays off. Since Monday, cutbacks have reduced us down to less TAs. So I have to do the same number of tutorials with less TAs. So what that effectively means is that any clashes of timetable have to be extended out. So I'm going to have to rescind my offer of Friday tutorials off for everybody, which I apologize for, but it's really not in my control. Simply put, we thought we'd have 3 teaching assistants, and in fact we only have 2. So I presume a lot of you were emailing Gerald O'Nolan about moving your tutorial times on Friday. Please, for the moment, try to make it to your tutorials as you are scheduled, and then we'll see if we get more funding for a new teaching assistant. Then we'll see if we can cut back on some of the more egregious tutorials, 5 to 6 on a Friday, that sort of thing. But so, to repeat for the moment, you are going to your tutorials on Friday. And I can only apologize for that, but again, it's not in my control. Okay, the second announcement is that there have been some emails asking me, can we get the books in the library, etc., etc. Yes, there are copies of the books in the library, but I didn't put them on reserve because I really want you to buy these books, especially the book review book. I encourage you all to buy the book, to write notes into the book, and to do your best to understand the book as best you can, okay? So that's the second announcement. Right, this is going to be a fun and an interesting lecture, and you're going to enjoy it immensely. But first, we have to look over what we're trying to do here. Remember that there are different agents or sectors in the economy. There are different ways of understanding how different people interact in the economy. Please take your seats as quickly as possible. Come on. So, there is the first and most important type of agent in the economy. We call this person the individual. Okay? Economics basically comes from the notion of the efficient use of resources of a household. Now, back when Socrates was well, not Socrates, but when Plato was writing about O Economicus, a household basically meant the guy in charge of the house. His wife was not really consulted on this, nor were his slaves or his children. So when they're talking about the household, really what they mean is one person. And in the current economy, in the modern 21st century Ireland, the reason that we use the word household as opposed to individual is because that's where we get most of our data from. Most of our data, in fact, comes from households. We get it from surveys. So many of you will have filled out the census or had the census filled out for you. You filled it out. If you filled it out personally, you were the head of that household. If you had it filled out for you, you weren't the head of that household, okay? So when we're talking about this, you can use the words individual and household interchangeably for most of this course. There'll be one exception, and I'll tell you what that is when we get to it. The second most important type of agent in the economy is the firm. The firm is represented as a for-profit entity. It exists to combine the factors of production, land, labor, and capital, into a specific output that it sells for a profit. That's a firm. A collection of firms we will call an industry. So, for example, you could have all the firms who sell cars. That's the car industry, okay? So a collection of firms is an industry, a collection of individuals could be a society. We have private banks. So there is a big difference between a private bank and a central bank. A private bank is something that is used to make money for itself. AIB, is AIB a private bank? Who owns AIB? You do. You own AIB. Is AIB a private bank? Yes. AIB is a private bank because it tries to make a profit for its shareholders. Who are its shareholders? You are its shareholders. If it makes a huge loss, who bears that loss? You bear that loss. What about Bank of Ireland? Is Bank of Ireland a private bank in this notion? It's a for-profit entity that tries to sell banking services? Absolutely, it is. Now, a central bank is fundamentally different from a private bank. The object of a central bank is to issue currency, so create money out of thin air and distribute it to the banks who give it to you. That's a central bank. And to maintain price stability. In other words, to stop there being a 9,000% inflation rate in one particular month. There's a big difference between the central bank and the private bank. Then we have the government. Its job is to get in the way, basically. Its job is to get in the way. Now you might go, oh, it's Stephen, some right-wing lunatic who believes that, the government should only be there to stop people from shooting you. No, I don't just believe that. I believe the government has a central role in helping to stabilize the vagaries of the market. But actually, quite literally, the government gets in the way. It gets in the way of you spending all your money. It stops you from spending. If you earn 100 euros, you have to pay some of that in tax. And it stops you from doing that. But it also stops you from getting hit over the head and robbed. Because it has big men who we call guards, big men and women, and they will stop those people. And if they don't stop those people and you do end up getting the head kicked off you, your taxes pay for a hospital so that somebody can fix you up. We also pay for judges. We pay for roads. We pay for many other things. Is this efficiently provided? Absolutely not. Is it necessary? Yes. Why is it necessary? It's necessary because of the theory of public goods, which we'll come across in the next lecture. Now, of course, Ireland is not on its own. We don't exist in a vacuum. We're a tiny island on the edge of Europe. So of course we have to think about the rest of the world. So when we're talking about these agents, these guys interact with one another. They work against one another sometimes. They work with one another. They hurt each other in many cases. In Ireland right now, the biggest problem is the fact that the private sector, firms and households, are up to their necks in debt. The ratio of household debt to disposable income in the USA is around 100%. So that means after you've paid off your mortgage and your ESB bill, you basically, for every euro you have that's left over in America, after all that, you owe €1. That's pretty high. In Ireland, the same ratio of household debt to disposable income is 210%, meaning for every euro you have left over, you owe €2.10. This is an unsustainable situation, okay? The biggest problem is how we, the over-indebted households and firms, interact with the private banks who are over-indebted and in really deep trouble. But there's also a further connection, an even more fundamental connection in a certain sense, which is that we now own many of the banks that are trying to kick us out of our houses. So it's a pretty strange connection. And this is some of the beauty and some of the tragedy in economics. So today, we're only looking at households and firms. I've already explained why households are not individuals, and your case studies should show you something about the market structure and something about supply and demand. So, this is from Sun Tzu's The Art of War. It'll become clear in a little while why I'm reading you out this quote. In 404 AD, Liu pursued the rebel Huan Hassan up the Yangtze and fought a naval battle with him at the island of Chenghung. The loyal troops numbered only a few thousand, while their opponents were in great force. But Hassan, fearing the fate that was in store for him should be overcome, had a light boat made fast to the side of his war junk, that's a warship, so that he might escape, if necessary at a moment's notice. The natural result was that the fighting spirit of his soldiers was utterly quenched, and when the loyalists made an attack from windward with fireships, all striving with the utmost ardour to be first in the fray, Hassan's forces were routed and had to burn their baggage and fled for 2 days and nights without stopping. Fundamentally, economics is about expectations. So would everybody please write this down? your expectations about the future change your behavior today. Your expectations about the future change your behavior today. Your expectations about the future change your behavior today. If you believe that the price of houses is going to keep falling, as we saw in the last lecture, you're not going to buy a house. If you believe they're going to go up, you will buy a house. But can you see that by acting on this belief, on this hope, you are changing reality? Okay? You are changing the facts on the ground. Your belief about the future changes how you act today. So, it's very important. What I'd like you to learn today, we're going to review the microeconomic approach to household utility maximization, and we're going to look at it in terms of choice under uncertainty and choice under certainty. Here are the concepts I'd really like you to understand at the end of this. Household utility maximization, the very concept of utility, and the notion of constrained optimization. Now we're going to do constrained optimization here graphically. On the website right now, or in a little while anyway, I've written out a little web tutorial in the style of the Khan Academy to bring you through the mathematics of this slowly and easily. It's a lot easier than me trying to write it down here in the lecture, and you can take that at your own pace. Okay? So this is all part of the following learning strategy. First off, I want to show you households as both utility maximizers, something called satisficers, or maybe we're something in between. Then we'll look at firms, banks, and the government before getting into the really heavy, cool bit about microeconomics and macroeconomics. So, microeconomics is about the household working subject to constraints. The idea from Aristotle is that economics in today's terms, is the good management of income, consumption, and saving. That's directly from Aristotle. That's what this is. You manage your income so that you can consume as much as you'd like in a given period, and you save a bit to be prudent. Okay? That's the notion here that we have, these constraints. So one of your constraints is time. You only have 168 hours in a week. Another constraint is your budget. Some of you have much tighter constraints than others. Some of you have to live on 100 euros a week. Some of you might live on 1,000 euros a week. I don't know. Some of you may live on far more. In Micro 101 with Dr. Lenihan, you assume the following. First, that households are consumers of stuff. Okay? They prefer more stuff to less stuff. This is the assumption known as monotonicity. Effectively, it means if I give you more money, you will consume more stuff. All things being equal, 2 apples are better than 1 apple. Yeah? 2 BMWs better than 1 BMW. You can rank your preferences. Do you prefer BMWs to Mercedes? Do you prefer Mercedes to BMW? Do you prefer Mercedes to BMW to Volkswagen? Yeah, okay. Do you prefer Mercedes to BMW to Volkswagen? And if it's the case that you prefer BMW to Mercedes, then it must be the case that you prefer Mercedes to Volkswagens. That's the third one, transitivity. You can form complete choice sets. And so what we do is we give you a utility function, which looks like this. Which the way to read that little formula is u of x1 and x2. So that's the first bit. That's the first bit here. U of x1 and x2 is equal to x1 to the power of 0.5 multiplied by x2 to the power of 0.5. What this thing does, this thing is the general form. Okay. What this says is you have a certain number utility. Yeah, you have a certain amount that you can assign to it. And that's for 2 goods, x1 and x2. So think of x1 as beer, and think of x2 as pizza. Okay? You combine these things. What this says is, all things being equal, you're 50-50 between the consumption of beer and pizza. Okay? It says, all things being equal, you like a 50% jump. If this was 70 and this was 30, then it would be the case that you prefer 70% of your income to be spent on beer and 30% of your income to be spent on pizza, which I think is pretty accurate for a UL audience, actually. So that's cool. So what we're going to do is, what I'd like you to do is, I'd like you to write down that formula for me, please. Can you just, this thing here, can you try to write this one down. Because what we're going to do is I'm going to illustrate this idea for you. Write this one down for me. Okay? Wow. That didn't come out like I wanted. Yeah, it looks like I drew that with my toes. So sorry about that. I just made that worse, didn't I? Okay. Whatever. We get it. We get over it. There we go. So write that one down because I want to illustrate something with you now. I want to give you an exercise to try to explain this thing, this ranking utility thing. But I want to talk to you first about the notion of perspective. Perspective. Your perspective matters. It really matters. Right now, my perspective is very different to your perspective. You're sitting down looking at me. I'm standing up looking at you. My perspective is very different. So viewed from this perspective, it's my job to teach you guys, to lecture to you. Okay? Viewed from that perspective, it's your job to maximize your grades. Try to learn some stuff along the way as well. What I want you to do now is I want you to consider the following exercise from the perspective of society. Okay? From the perspective of society. Not your own individuals, your own individual beliefs, but from the perspective of society. So here's the exercise. The objective of the exercise is to examine the criteria and processes which might be used in setting priorities for resource allocation. Okay? It's your job now to think about resource allocation. Congratulations, you've all individually just been elected the Minister for Health. You may now grow large beards and begin to look incredibly like Brendan Grace. Good. Okay, the foreign students don't know who Brendan Grace is. Actually, some of the younger students probably don't know who he is either. You're a big hairy man named James Riley. Okay. Now, a survey has been carried out, and the healthcare needs of the local population have been identified. So we've got 400 people requiring treatment. There are 10 primary and secondary healthcare interventions that you, the minister, have to figure out how to pay for. The interventions and the numbers are displayed in this table, and the price being charged by the local providers will give you the total cost. So what I'd like you to do is look very carefully at this table. So what you can see here is effectively a demand schedule and the supply function for them. So you can see that 50 people want hip replacement at an individual cost of $12,720. Giving a total cost of €600,036. Finally, a hernia treatment, 50 people want to do it, it costs $1,750. Treatment for bilateral prominent ears, in other words, if you have sticky outy ears, you can have that fixed. That costs $9,000. Renal replacement therapy, that's essentially a liver transplant. I suppose after 4 years here, you may require one yourselves. GP advice to quit smoking, 750 quid. I don't know why that costs 750 quid, but anyway. Female sterilization, carpal tunnel surgery, cataract treatment, double heart valve replacement, and treatment for varicose veins. The total cost is $3,279,400. So what I'd like you to do is rank these for me. What I want you to do is rank these for me. You can send it to me on Twitter. I figured out I could just use the Twitter thing on the phone. Or you can text. Or you can just stick up your hands. So I think it might be useful this time to stick up your hands. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to rank this. So where ranking means, for example, that we do this. We say, oh, maybe hip replacement therapy is the most important, so we rank that number 1. Maybe a hernia treatment is the second most important, we rank that number 2. Okay? So, just from your own thoughts about this, how would you rank this? So just read the table carefully for a minute. It's 12:19. At 12:20, we'll start ranking. So I want you to read the table, talk amongst yourselves. Try to figure out which one it is. If you have somebody next to you, even if you don't know them, talk to them. It's very important. Talk about the criteria and processes. If you're on your own, talk behind you if you're on your own. Don't talk about the weather, talk about this. What criteria are you using? Really important. Okay. So, excellent. So now, I think it might be even quicker, rather than doing the text message thing, which might force me to go away from this. Why don't we just do it by show of hands? So stick your hands up if you think this is important, okay? So who thinks that hip replacement therapy is the most important thing that we should do? Hands up, hands way up. 1, okay, good. Who thinks that hernia treatment is the most important? Treatment for bilateral prominent ears? Renal replacement therapy. It's a new liver. GP advice to quit smoking, carpal tunnel, cataract treatment, double heart valve replacement. Everybody thinks this is the most important. And indeed you are correct, because if the person doesn't get this, they are toast. They're brown bread. It's over for the foreign students are like, why does he turn into a piece of bread? They're going to die. Sorry, I know, genuinely, it's only slightly facetious. I should try to use more obvious English. So the next most important thing, hip replacement therapy. Hands up who thinks hip replacement therapy is the next most important thing. Hands up who thinks it's renal replacement therapy. Okay. Second one. Who thinks hip replacement therapy is the third most important one? Okay. Who thinks it should be treatment for varicose veins? Okay. Who thinks it should be carpal tunnel syndrome? Does everybody know what carpal tunnel syndrome is? Okay. Yeah, it's where your wrist gets hurt. Treatment for bilateral hernia treatment? Hernia? Okay. 3. And I think, no, I got that wrong. 3, 4. Okay. Right, and I hope you can see that what we're talking about here is the rest of them are, while they are important to the people who suffer from them, they're more or less elective procedures, aren't they? They're more or less elective. If you have bilaterally prominent ears, you can probably go another year without having them seen to. Do you know? Unless you're like Dumbo or something, you know. But you know, that's important. So we can see we can rank easily the top 4 pretty easily, right? And the rest of them, I mean, maybe you think this is the most important one, but from the perspective of society. But now think about the criteria. Before we move on, think about the criteria. Why did you make that choice? Why did you make that choice? It was pretty obvious which the most important 3 were, and the rest of them were like, yeah, whatever, you know, if it happens, it happens. Why did you make that choice? Text in, or text in, or stick up your hand if you've got a comment. Why did you make that choice? What criteria did you use? Okay, criterion, if it's 1. Why did you choose that? Do you all remember the text number? Why did you choose? Did you all run out? So one comment is, well, what can you live without? What can you live without? What's most important? Okay. What else? Time constraints. Okay. So importance to the individual kind of thing, and time constraints. What else? What other constraints would you use to guide your decision? Come on, you're the Minister for Health, like. Money. Okay. Well, you've no budget constraint. It's costing 3 million. I haven't mentioned anything about budgets. It's 2005. Rock on. You know, rock on. And a pony too. You can have all that and a pony. Charlie McCreevy, when I have it, I spend it. That's the world you live in now. I haven't mentioned a single word about budgets. I will, but I haven't.
But the publicity would cause if a lot of people, it came out that a lot of people were dying because they're not getting their operations on time. It would look like Henry wouldn't get re-elected.
So the publicity that it would cause if you didn't get your operations on time and you died, it would be bad publicity. I would argue that kind of happens now anyway, and he seems okay with it. But anyway, okay, we've got a comment here. Severity by number of people. Very good. Excellent, excellent. Severity by number of people. So if you had, so by that argument, if you had somebody who was complete, they were in bits, they need to be reassembled essentially cell by cell, but it cost 99% of the budget, would you pay for that? And leave the other 399 people, be like, good luck, buddy. You know, more sit-ups for you. Try not to have, you know, any heart racing type moments. Severity by number of people. Okay? So by that argument, the most severe people should be treated first, with the least severe people being treated last. This is kind of the emergency room kind of triage approach to healthcare, right? Which means the most damaged, the most in need gets seen first. But this is an important piece. What about the person who feels like they really need the GP's advice to quit smoking? I mean, smoking is a really important thing. It's half of the people who smoke will be dead from smoking. Yeah, it will kill them. Surely 750 quid to give them some advice would be a really good thing, wouldn't it? And it's really cheap. It's like a stitch in time saves 9 type argument. I think that would be pretty cool, actually. Personally, I think that I would like that idea. Because it's quite cheap, it's kind of preventative medicine. Okay. So, we crashed our PowerPoint. Okay. Quite sure how we did that. All right. So, when this thing boots up, any more criteria? So one was by time, the other was severity by number of people, the other was, what was the other one? How much you needed. Okay. So now, why did you make these choices? You made these choices, and I think everybody made these choices from the point of view of the individual doing the suffering. You were able pretty objectively, regardless of the cost, because I didn't tell you anything about the cost, to rank the medical priority of the individual. So what you were doing effectively was maximizing the utility of the people in the society. You were effectively trying to help the most damaged, the most hurt people first, and then getting to everybody else as and how you can. You are lovely people. You are lovely, lovely people. You are doing what Jeremy Bentham, a utilitarian philosopher from the 1700s, said informed, smart people would do. You are looking after the weakest in society, and by doing that, you are making society better. You are maximizing the overall level of happiness in the society. Because of course, if it were you, and you needed a new heart, and you got the new heart, your utility would be much greater. You would be much happier than the person who perhaps got a little bit of advice and may not even take it. Okay? Oh shit. A recession has hit. And public spending budgets have now been constrained. You now have 2.2 million to do the same job. There's a shortfall of 1 million. How are you going to do this, folks? Now rank it. Talk amongst yourselves for a minute. You may need to do some calculations. It's 12:29, I'm going to give you until 12:31. You've only got 2 million to spend. Off you go. Come on, talk amongst yourselves. If you've got people on their own, talk behind. Talk amongst yourselves. Decide which ones you would want to do. Okay? Make the decision. How are you going to do this? That's a hard budget constraint, by the way. There's no chance you're going to break it. You can't like overspend for the crack. Okay? For the fun. How are you going to do it? Come on, discuss amongst yourselves. Think about the criteria you used in the first exercise. How did you do it? How did you do it? Okay. How are you going to rank this, lads and lassies? It's not easy, is it? It's not easy. Okay. So last time we had more or less 100% agreement that the guy with the heart valves is the person you rank first to save. What about this time? Hands up who saves the heart valve guy. About 25% of people. Hands up who puts the renal replacement therapy first. 1. Hands up who puts the hip replacement therapy first. Interesting. What about treatment for varicose veins? GP advice to quit smoking. 2 or 3 people. Female sterilization. Okay. Hernia treatments. Did everybody understand the question? Shout out what you put first. I'm just going to pick somebody at random. What did you pick? What's the first thing ranking that you picked?
I suppose the renal replacement therapy.
Okay, renal replacement. Very good. It says renal replacement therapy because it's cheap. Now, what did you put first?
The double heart valve thing could you get rid of, like, to survey that on the elderly and how well they do that in the survey.
Interesting. So double heart valve thing, but do a survey on the elderly. So if you're like 80, we're not going to help you. No. It's a serious question. So.
How their body is going to take you can't tell how they're going to take it.
Sure.
So you can do some tests.
Okay, so break down the number of people who need, excellent answer. Break down the number of people who need it, and by the probability of success, then don't give it to 20, maybe only give it to 15, something like that. Okay, so like ration, the argument is ration within each box. So that's a really good argument. What about you, sir, Gabaya? What are you going to pick first? You. Hip replacement. Okay, why hip, not renal? Okay, so actually, hip and renal more or less the same. Hip and hernia, sorry. Okay, so the renal guys come second. Okay, very good. So you're looking more or less at the demand for these services. Okay, very good. This is the black striking top. Is it black? No? Okay. What would you choose? Renal replacement first. What about third? What would you do third? Hip replacement. Okay. What about everything? The way this is constructed, you can afford everything except the heart valve replacement. If you do the maths, if you whip out your calculator, you can afford everything on this list except the hearts. The guys who need the heart valves, okay, if you don't allow them their treatments, everyone else will be sorted. So in the interest of society, because society is 400 people, so 380 people will be made better off, okay? You're the Minister for Health, you have to make this decision. You can make 380 people better off if you discontinue the double heart valve. Hands up who would do that. Okay, about 10% of the class. Hands up who wouldn't do that. Okay. I want to hear from one person who did. Third in the orange arm back. Why wouldn't you?
Well, I didn't say I wouldn't.
Okay. So you would.
I do choose any possibility.
You're the Minister for Health, did you have? What way is it? So what would you do? Would you choose everybody above the few? What would you do? It's your job. Trying to imagine you here now. Your job.
It's a tough question.
Okay, that's what happened.
To be honest, I really don't know.
Okay, No, that's fine. It's fine. No, no. This is the yellow. I don't know what that is. The yellow. What do you think?
I suppose it's better off for everyone else to not have hard problem placement, and again, we just kill the people because it's taken.
Very important. So I suppose it's better off to not fund the hard thing because it's better for everybody else. But you are killing 20 people by not funding. There. You're killing them. If they don't get this, they're going to die. Or they're going to have a really, really crap volume. Okay? So this is the binder. The binder is an ethical bind. Effectively. You're worried about the ethics of the situation. It's probably wrong to kill people, but you can't stray beyond your budget. If you stray beyond your budget, you're hurting taxpayers in the future. Do you care about taxpayers in the future? Who's more important right now to you? The guy with the double heart valves, or the taxpayer who has to pay increased taxes 10 years from now? Who are you going to choose? Hands up who chooses the heart valve. Hands up who chooses the taxpayer in the future. 4 guys. No, more. Hands up again. All right, about 10%. So about 50% of the class would choose to save the heart valve guy. About 10% of the class would let the heart valve guy die. Cold. But you would help the taxpayers in the future. Okay. Here's what happened when this experiment was run in 1995 with doctors. They were going to kill the heart valve. They cut it out. They ranked number 3, minimum number 1, maximum number 8. They cut it out because these are doctors. Next time you see a dude in a white coat, don't show him how much money you have in your wallet. They cut it out because they ranked 380 people's welfare or utility or happiness above the 20. Yeah? It's really important. Okay? It's really important. Every day, people have to make choices about what they want to spend their money on. If you're the Minister of Health in a country, that means making choices that will harm other people. It implies it, as a matter of fact. It means if you don't pay for a €12,000 drug, the one child who will benefit greatly from that drug will have a decreased quality of life. It means if you have to cut your budgets and reduce home care for the disabled, that will happen. And you will hurt hundreds, if not thousands, of people. That's what a budget constraint is. It implies a choice between a series of alternatives. When the budget constraint is effectively, it's especially hard. That implies really harming people. Now this is only a caricature example, but you can see this happening in Ireland right now. These choices are being made. What's the lesson of our little exercise? The first is that constraints force choice. Please write that down. Constraints force choice. Okay? If you have no constraints, then there's no need to make the choice. You buy both. You help everyone. Happy days. High five, go home, buy yourself a pony. Constraints come in many forms. There are supply constraints. There aren't enough doctors. There are demand constraints. There aren't enough people who want to buy the stuff. There are institutional rules. I can't stick on a white coat and call myself doctor. Okay? I can't do it. There are rules. You can't just rock up and go, hi, I'm a medical professional, let me set your hip. Not everybody can do it. This is an illustration of Bentham's what's called utility. He said it's that property of an object whereby it tends to produce benefit, advantage, pleasure, good or happiness, or to prevent the happening of mischief, pain, evil, or unhappiness to the party whose interest is considered. So a Mars bar, which is a candy of chocolate that we have in Ireland, gives you utility. You go, nom, 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 very nice, lovely. A seat belt isn't particularly tasty, but it will save you in the event of a crash. I don't know how many of you tried to eat a seat belt. I don't want to know, actually. But the point is, you don't get direct utility. You don't go, oh, this seat belt is so pleasurable. That's not how it works. Most of the time. That's not how it works, okay? Most of the time you go, oh, this is just boring. Why am I doing this? The truth about it is, it only becomes useful when it reduces your pain, when you need it, okay? It's a very important concept. And we make it mathematical here. This is what you learned last year. This is what you learned last year. Would everybody just draw the diagram for me? Write it down for me. Okay? On the x-axis, which is the one that goes up, no, it's the one that goes across, you have quantities of a good. So that, I call this good x2, but just think about it as pizza, right? It could be anything. So this line out here represents like 100 pizzas, yeah? And the line up on the way up represents the quantity of x1 that you're going to consume. You're going to eat this, yeah? It's beer. You're going to drink it. It's beer, okay? And you have to choose a combination of these two things. 2 cans of beer, 1 big pizza. 3 pizzas, no beer. 9 beers, the pizza box. Okay? And what we do is, you represent your choices. So here, at this particular point, let's say here, so let's say you're at this point. This point corresponds to a certain amount of stuff and a certain amount of stuff. There's a certain amount of x1, beer, and a certain amount of x2. Okay? Now, we've already assumed that people prefer more to less. So what that means is, effectively, if you can afford it, you're going to consume more. You're going to consume this much. Okay? Which is if you look at it, more beer and, Jesus, more beer and more pizza. Oh, sorry. On my screen, this is tiny. That's why it's looking so... It's looking like I've had a couple of beers before coming in here, so sorry. And some pizza. But of course, if your income allows it, you can go out a little bit more, consume another amount of x1 and x2, until your budget constraint is met. Now what that means is that blue line there is your budget constraint. It's a straight line. Yeah? It's a linear combination of the two goods. What it means is, up to that line, you can afford everything. And on that line, what you're doing is changing between the different combinations. So this, for example, is you spending your entire budget on mostly beer. Hands up who does that. Yeah, you're too hammered to even answer. Okay, down here, they're like, blah. Down here, you're spending most of your money on pizza, which means you probably have a weight problem. And in here, in the middle here, this is something called the indifference curve. The indifference curve maps out for every individual item, for every individual combination of choices, that combination around which you'd be indifferent. So if you have 2 beers and 1 pizza, you're exactly as happy as if you had 2 pizzas and 1 beer. That's what it means to be indifferent. It means you don't strictly prefer something. You don't go, oh, I love beer, I hate pizza. So you're going to do that. You're going to go, well, you know, it's more or less the same. That's what that means. And that utility function is represented by this indifference curve. And it's at this point where the indifference curve meets the budget curve that your utility is maximized. Okay? You are happiest when you're consuming the most you can of both in an acceptable combination to you. Yeah? That's when you're happy. That's when you're happiest. Now you might think this is a pile of crap. The world does not look like this. Actually, it turns out the world kind of does look like this. There are very many ways to describe this, but basically, experimentally, it can be shown that lots of people do prefer several things to less. Just for example, hands up here who hates bananas. Hates them, like. I mean, if the only food was banana, you'd be like, I'd be grand. Just get them out of my face. If they feel a little bit like queasy, you go near a banana. Hands up again. 3-4% of the class. Hands up here who hates, I don't know, I was going to say nuts, but I'm not going to do it. Hands up here, I hate nuts. Hands up here who hates sponges. Some people hate the feeling of a sponge. It just came up last year, that's all. 2-3 people. Again, there are things that they are not normal goods to you. A normal good is something, if you had more of it, if your income went up, you'd consume more of it. It doesn't matter if your income is €1 million a year, the people who hate bananas and sponges are never buying them. So this assumes that your goods are normal. So what we're doing is we're maximizing this. We're trying to get the highest value of this red curve subject to this constraint. This line, would everybody please write this down? This line is what's called your budget constraint. It says that the price of good X1 plus the price of good x2 has to be at least less than or equal to some amount m. That m is your budget. So let's say the price of a beer was €1 and the price of a pizza was €10. Okay? So if the price of a beer is 1, P1 equals 1, and the price of a pizza, P2, is equal to 10. And let's say your budget, I'm doing my best here, folks, is 20. Your budget is 20. Hands up here who would buy 10 cans of beer. 10 by 1 plus 1 by 10 equals less than or equal to 20. So hands up here who'd buy 10 cans of beer and 1 pizza. Interesting, it's mostly lads. Okay. Hands up here who would buy, well actually, can you buy 2 pizzas? Hands up here who would buy 2 pizzas and no beer. Interesting, okay. Can you buy a combination of them both? No, because the pizza's so expensive. You can either have 1 pizza, 2 pizzas, or no pizza. Yeah. So you could buy, hands up here who would buy 20 cans of beer. So you would be up here. Okay, there you are. Some of you are here, but most of you are here. Most of you take the balanced option. 10 beers, 1 pizza. Okay? So the household is happiest there. Now, how do you deal with the shadow of the future? We talked about Heng Xuan in Sun Tzu's. How do you deal with the shadow of the future? Already 3 times in this lecture it's come up. Some of you were more than happy to increase taxes today, but that would harm taxpayers in the future to pay for hip replacements. You valued the guy who needed the heart today over the person who wasn't born yet. If saving a life is worth $1 million today, how much should we spend to save a life in 20 years? How much would you spend to save a life in 20 years? Hands up who'd spend €1 million to definitely save the life. Like, I'm guaranteeing you I'm going to save it. Now, let's say the €1 million is like in research for heart stuff. Yeah? Would you all pay €1 million if I was definitely going to save a life? 2, 3, hands up who'd pay $500,000. 400,000? 300,000? 200,000? 100,000? Nothing? Hands up here who just want to go. Okay. People are so bored and they're just like, I can't even do it. Let's see. Okay. So it turns out that insurance companies have to deal with this all the time. Insurance companies are required to figure out how much they're going to compensate you for in the event of a crash. And it turns out that the answer is €150,000. That's how much your life is worth in 20 years. And if you think, oh, that's very crude, that's true. Yeah, there's some of you going to take the 150 grand now, but that's true. So what we have to do is we have to find a way to understand the future in the terms of the present. €1 today is worth more than €1 at some time in the future. The time value principle. If I loan you €100 in year 1, it's going to be repaid in year 2. You're going to forego the use of the €100 only if you get paid a premium. That premium, of course, is the interest rate. If the 2 people agree that the second person is going to pay 110 in 2 years, in year 2, then the interest rate is obviously 10%. If you ask the first person how much the 110 is worth to her today, she'd probably answer 100. What the second person does is discount. She discounts the money she will receive in the future by 10%. The discount rate and the interest rate are inverse. Interest rate is what you get paid to forego your consumption. Discount rate is what you're looking at in terms of future consumption. That's the difference between the two. Hands up here who will work when they leave college? Some really lazy people there. You do like, it'll be fine, I'll marry some load. Hands up here, you're all going to work when you leave college. Hands up here who's going to die. Some really fucking optimistic people here. It'll be grand, I'll stick my head in the freezer. It'll all work out. It'll all work out. I'll wake up as like Fry in Futurama or something. It'll, you know, that's grand. Let's think about 2 periods. You have 2 periods of your life. When you're young and when you're old. When you're young, you can work. When you're young, you can work. And when you're old, you can't work. Okay? How? There's 2 periods. Imagine that this is X2 and this is X1. How are you going to allocate your consumption? How are you going to allocate your consumption across this? Are you going to just spend all of your money and be like, oh dear, I'm going to starve, I'm 65. Yeah. You know, get out the begging bowl and try like to live that way. How are you going to live? What is this going to look like? What's the shape of this curve going to look like? Are you going to linearly give half your money in the past to the future? Are you going to save 50% of your money today? Hands up here who has a pension. Hands up really high. That's good. I'm going to just go on a limb and go mature students. One more time. Hands up here who's going to die. Hands up who's going to get old. Hands up here who has a pension. You must be thinking really stupid right now. Are you? You do realize that through the miracle of compounding, the money you save today will get greater when you become 65. When you start saving at 20, it's great. Why don't you all have pensions? Is there something wrong with you?
How can you save when there's nothing worth to save from? You don't get enough money to put it aside.
Well, you can put €1 a week aside.
And what would you get?
You get 5%.
Well, except say euros.
Any bank, they're so delighted for money. You can save. Everybody here can save €5 a week. In fact, I would assume that lots of people have money saved up after the summer for the college. So everybody can save, absolutely. Why don't you? We have established the empirical regularity that you will all get old, and you'll all die. So why don't you all have pensions? Because we don't. Okay. Because you don't have jobs, most of you, and the jobs don't switch on with pensions. I would argue that the shape looks a bit like this. You will consume in a curve that looks like that. And what you'll do is you'll have your consumption in period 1 and your consumption in period 2 divided by the discount rate. 1 plus the discount. D. Okay? I literally look like a 6-year-old wrote that. But okay. C1, consumption in period 1 when you're young, plus C2 divided by the discount rate. What would happen if I told you all that the expected life expectancy for all of you is 40? Like at 40, you're dead. Would you save? Probably not. Meaning that your discount rate would be incredibly, incredibly low. Yeah? What happens? I don't know, just give me 2 more minutes. What happens when all of you live to be 100? All of you are going to live to be 100. For the ladies in the room, hands up here who plan on having children or have had children already. Just ladies, guys, you're important at a particular point in the process, but really thereafter your influence fades rather rapidly. Ladies in the room, hands up high who plan on having 8 children at all or have had them. Hands up high. Interesting. How many plan on having 6 children? It's funny, it's a joke now. 30 years ago, it would have been 5 children, 4 children, 3 children, 2 children, 1 child, 0 children, -1 children. You're like, yeah, suck one up. Anyway, Next week, we're going to look at rational choice of the risk. Rational choice of the risk. The truth is that any of you will have many children, and your discount rate will change as you get older. Thank you very much.
Of the library to find it hasn't been out since 1975.
Classic.
If they had read and took
Hang on a
the
sec,
first
let me
2
just-
pages of his thing, he wouldn't be in trouble today. Amazing. Anyway, I found it.
He's